everyone. My name is Jesse Chason with Lisa Blanchard as the host of Airing Addiction.
I share often my journey started on this campus. Got sober as a client here, just like you.
I really do see phenomenal change.
Always hope. I've seen situations that on the surface look impossible become possible.
Doing this podcast is to share those recovery stories, be honest about what the challenges are and have some real conversations, but kind of share that out on the airwaves.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Airing Addiction. I'm Lisa Blanchard. It is March if you're listening live or close to when we send this podcast out to the airwaves. It is the end of winter and beginning of spring. So one of the things that I'm really excited about for spring is it's always an opportunity to talk about new beginnings, to talk about hope, right? Spring always comes. And I think that's a great way to talk about our guest today. And so I will turn it over to Jesse to introduce our fantastic guest, but welcome spring, everybody.
Welcome spring is right. Thanks, Lisa. Hope springs eternal, right? And we always talk about hope on this podcast. So this guest we have today, I met at some point in the recent history, and he's one of those people that when I first met him, I knew he had a lot of hope. He was just on fire for recovery. He had a strong message of hope and overcoming obstacles. So, it's fitting that we have him on here today. And without further ado, I introduce Craig B.
Thanks, Jesse. That was such a gracious intro, guys. Thank you so much. My name's Craig. I identify as an alcoholic and an addict. However, I'm definitely addicted to that disease of more that you hear about. I lack balance a lot in my life still to this day, and it's something I'm working on. I grew up with a loving family, two loving parents, and I always like to say that because I think this disease that I have, it really doesn't matter whether you have one, two, four parents. In your life, because it's not non-discriminatory. Like it will take over. So when I had my first drink at 15 at an older high school mate's party, and I drank to excess, shocker. And I woke up that next day, and I couldn't wait to do it again. And even talking to like a lot of my coworkers who were in recovery. One of my coworkers said how in high school, it's all they thought about, like on that Sunday, like whose parents are leaving for the next weekend and who has an open house and who can get the booze and all that stuff. And it really like took over. Thank God I had sports in high school, played 3 sports, and I loved it. I loved that team aspect, which is probably why I love AA so much. It's that camaraderie that I have, that fellowship. And made it through high school. I got a little bit of money to play football in college locally, and I know this is going to come as another shock again, but I got in trouble for drinking like that first day, and was almost asked to not be on campus, and I quit the football team, and it was all because looking back, it's because I was like partying too hard. I wasn't going to class, I wasn't taking anything serious, and I ended up dropping out of college. I unfortunately had 2 friends pass away within 2 weeks of each other. And I really used that as a crutch to drink the way I wanted to and quit school and just kind of be left alone from everything, not dealing with that grief when it came up. So I kind of just was, floating through life without really a care in the world, drinking quite a bit, smoking weed and doing all those things and I always thought like, well, drinking's not going to be a problem unless I get in trouble for it. And lo and behold, it was Christmas Eve night, and I got pulled over for an OUI. And I still really didn't think I had a problem. I ended up, having to go through the classes, and it was my first introduction to AA. And I can actually remember sitting in a noontime meeting in Worcester, just getting my core card signed. I actually thought like I would just get the card signed and leave, but they take it from you and don't give it to you till the end. So it was actually, it was my introduction there. And I remember feeling bad for the people in there because like, oh, I'm taking away from these people hearing the message, and like I have to be here to get a core card signed. And I ended up getting through that. And there's a lot of money that's involved in that, fines and your insurance and all this other things. that, I didn't really take into consideration at the time. But from there, I thought my problem was drinking and driving, not drinking. So I kind of just switched that obsession from drinking to smoking. And I heard in a meeting, and most of the stuff I'll say is things I heard either at in treatment or in AA meetings. And one of the things someone said is switching the obsession is just like switching the seat on the Titanic. And I smoked weed alcoholically, like to excess, to the point where I could barely keep my eyes open, all those things. And um, then I moved out of my parents' house. Life was getting good, and I had a great job. I had a girlfriend. I had a car, and I moved above a bar on Shrewsbury Street in Worcester. And there, I wasn't driving anywhere, but I was coming home, blackout, and I was miserable, and drinking 3 or 4 days a week, going into work hungover, not being the best person that I can be. And I lived like that for a long time, and until around the pandemic hit, I took a new job that also wasn't conducive to my recovery. And from there, things got really bad. Drugs are also a part of my story. I started doing party drugs, and I like to say the party was just me because I was so selfish. I didn't want to share any drugs with anyone. And I hid that stuff from the people that loved me and cared about me. And I was in pretty much complete isolation. And, some stuff started hitting the fan. And, I was kind of back against the wall, and I had got fired from this job and decided to take a job as a DoorDash driver, which, I thought I could just get, do deliveries, get money, but they kind of hold that money from you the first week. So I was screwed. I was broke. And got a phone call from a friend who said, I was also the type of person who I wanted to go to the party. I mean, I wanted to be invited to the party, but I wasn't going at the same time, like I just wanted the invite. And I saw on social media that all my friends were out, and I wasn't. And I was like, oh, thanks for my invite. And they said, and my buddy was the first person who kind of called me out on my BS. And he was like, how could we invite you when we were talking about you? You have a problem. And I was like, wow, that one, it really hit me. And no one had ever, people either let me drink and drug the way I wanted to, or I thought I knew more and I was hiding it, which I really wasn't hiding it well at all. So from there, I was drunk driving, delivering people's food. And basically I came to this gas station in Marlboro, and I had to go to the bathroom, and I just fell to my hands and knees in this disgusting shell bathroom. And I just called my sister and I asked for help. And I said, here's what's going on. I have a really bad problem. And she so calmly said, just come home. Everything's going to be okay. And, I don't know what I was expecting, but I got home and had to relive that whole story to my parents. And we decided as a team, and by team, I mean those three told me I was going to go get help at a treatment center. And thank God I got hooked up with the New England Recovery Center, actually. And, it was my first time doing anything like that. It felt like going to camp almost, but I knew it wasn't camp. It was a place I was going to, be kind of locked away. I thought like locked away, and, I wasn't going to have my phone. I wasn't going to be able to like do my tobacco the way I wanted to. Plus I was like not going to have, as my sponsor calls it, that binky, my crutch to deal with my emotions. And I will say I got there, and during that intake, almost just like relief of like, okay, everyone in my life knows exactly what's been going on with me. And there was like a relief, a weight off my shoulders. And, I go through there. I wanted to just sleep and sleep and sleep, but there was an RS there who was screaming up and down the halls, participate in your own recovery. And that hit me too. It's like, okay, if I'm here, I might as well, like there's no end in sight for me right now. Like I might as well start learning about, this disease I have, and, maybe why I've done some of the things I've done. And I always talk about this too when I share my story is two things happened on that second day there. I remember calling home for the first time and being like real mean and like that detox from alcohol and drugs, and saying to my parents, like, thanks a lot for sending me here. None of these people are anything like me. I don't do X, Y, and Z like they do. I'm just here, blah, blah, blah. And a person in very young sobriety who doesn't know anything. And then one of the first commitments that came in that night in that detox, it was an all-girls sober house out of Attleboro. And there was a girl, there was like 9 of them, and there was a girl, she was facing me dead on, and she had 90 days. It was her first time speaking, and she was so happy. And I remember thinking, like, how could someone be that happy? I just don't get it. And she was talking about all the things she was getting back early. Like, she's in a sober house, she's sober, so grateful to be sober. And, and, yeah, she was getting her children back in her life. And I just remember like being so annoyed at this girl, and it really stuck with me. And then, I decided to further my treatment after the 7 days of detox up to the Ferris building, to where that was another experience, my first kind of experience with community living, which there were definitely some ups and downs. But I just remember looking at my roommate saying like, I'm not going to group today. But yeah, I went to every group. And again, they're not always the best, but like I definitely took a lot out of there. And I'm not going to say I found that willingness. I had the willingness in the beginning, but at some point in time there, I definitely found that like willingness to like, okay. And I even remember it was in the summertime, and they would take us out to play like cornhole and kind of hang outside a couple times a week. And I remember like having fun for the first time in a while, and then being like, oh, it'd be really nice to have a drink while I do this. And I'm like, wow, that's like almost the first glimpse I saw of like my disease when I'm sober. Because like there were so many times I tried to quit, and I end up, getting a bag and a 12 pack by the end of the night and being like, how did I get here? And like that's my disease. That's the insanity of it, is like doing the same thing over and over again every day. And you know, there was another commitment that came in every Thursday, TSTD, which really like hit home. There's like a bunch of guys who were like tough guys, but yet, people cried there and talk about God and talk about a solution. It's not all like, the rowdy stuff that they kind of get maybe they were known for, but like that's been a meeting that's been huge to me in my sobriety. And seeing a bunch of guys come in every week and like really committing to like speaking to people in detox and in the CSS and stuff. So on the last day there, I had a plan to further my treatment even more and go to an outpatient program, a PHP called Perennial Recovery, which was right down the street in Westboro. And I remember calling home and thinking and saying to my parents, like, I'm scared to leave. Like, I've been surrounded with people who are just like me and people who understand me. And now I'm going out into this world where I'm just some alcoholic junkie who doesn't deserve a second chance. And then that same sober house came back in, the all girls sober house. And it was my last night there. And they started off the meeting by saying there was a girl who spoke last time they were here who had 90 days, and she went back out and passed away because she picked up again. And I always use that in my story because I have to tell myself that if I go back out and if I pick up a drink or a drug, like I'm as good as dead as well. So I remember leaving there and having this like feeling of freedom, but the fear that was in me, I can't even describe. I remember crying in my parents' bedroom like for 2 hours. Like I did the intake at Perennial, and I remember saying like, I hate that place. I'm not going back. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going back there. And like, thank God I did, because I learned so much at Perennial Recovery. I learned so much at New England Recovery. I just kept furthering my treatment, and attacking my recovery as if I attacked a drink or a drug, which is something I heard as well, that like I have to chase my recovery as much, if not more, than I chased like that drink or a drug. I go on a lot of commitments. I go to a lot of meetings all over like Central Mass. And it's because like I tell myself, like I would have driven 45 minutes for drugs or alcohol. So I just, I got to stay humble and remind myself that, even though I have, 8.5 months now, it's still one day at a time, and it's taken a lot of work to get here. And I really do try to just live in the day today. So I got out. Luckily I had the DoorDash to kind of lean on. And I remember I had all my meetings planned out because like you need a plan of action in recovery, and especially in the beginning. And, I needed to develop a routine because like addicts and alcoholics, they do well with routines. And like my routine before was just wake up, drink, drug, sleep, work, repeat, all that stuff. And so I don't really tell this story a lot, but I remember the Monday I knew there was a meeting in Worcester, and I went there, and I got out of the car and I went to the front door of the church, and I and I was locked, and in my head I'm like, oh, I tried. Then I got back in the car, and I had this moment of like this crossroad that like, if I don't go around back and try to find this place, like I'll never go to another meeting again, because that's how I am. Like if I like, ooh, I don't have a spouse or family like that I have to prove to that I'm going to meetings. I'm literally doing this for myself. So if I don't fully do that, then I'm not giving my full effort like I've been telling myself I was going to do for the past 30 days. So I ended up going around back and found the meeting. It wasn't the best one, and I don't go back to it, but I was like, it was the first moment I was almost like proud of myself for doing something, even if it was so small, like that. And then, I have, thank God, I went to this Thursday night meeting in Westboro. And this is where my whole recovery experience changed. I went to this Thursday night meeting, and I walked in this church basement, and there was like 6 people there. And I was like, oh no. I was like, I'm going to have to share. I just want a big speaker meeting where I sit in the back and I blend into the wall and nobody talks to me. And then some guys kind of trickle in. It was probably about 14, 15 people. And I realized that like I'm the only one who hasn't shared yet. Just like 5 minutes left. So like everyone's kind of looking at me. And I said something to the effect of like, I just got out of a 30-day program. I'm newly sober and I don't know what I'm doing. And that was a big step for me. And right after the meeting, a man comes up to me, and he asked me if I want a phone number. And me being like the on edge person I am, in my head, I'm like, I really just want you to get out of my face, dude. And, I just want to get to the door and get out of here. But I told myself that I'm going to do anything in sobriety at least once. It's almost like that movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey. Like, I'm just going to keep saying yes until like I get the result. And if not, like I won't do it again. So I said, yep, no problem. He's like, I'll text you from time to time just to see how you're doing. I'm like, perfect. So the next day I'm door dashing close to that meeting in Westboro. And I just got no tipped at a house, and I was fuming and I was pissed. And I get a text from this guy, and he's like, Craig, how you doing? And I'm like, I'm just trying to stay sober. And he's like giving me all the slogans like, God is good. Like, we're the lucky ones. And I'm like, yeah, you call this, like in my head, I'm like, you call this lucky, man? It's like, I am miserable. So I tell him I'm driving. I can't really talk, and I'll never forget. The time was 7:53. I'm going to put my phone down, and at 7:58, I get an order on DoorDash for Dairy Queen, which it's about 5 minutes from where I was. And as I go around the rotary and pull into Dairy Queen, right in front of me is that gentleman who was texting me and gave me the number from the previous day. So I'm like, geez. And in my head, I'm like, geez, like, so I get out and I'm like, we're very similar people now, knowing him for a while. I'm like, what, are you stalking me? And he's like, hey, I've been in line for 10 minutes. And like, we're kind of laughing and joking. I'm like, wow, what a coincidence, right? And he goes, that's no coincidence. He's like, that's God. But right before this, I knew I had to like pray and find a higher power and all these things. And I was really trying my hardest, but it was pretty much like talking to a wall. But right then and there, I tell you, like, I had a spiritual experience, and I felt it from my head to my toes. And he was trying to get me to go out to eat with this group of guys. And I was behind a month on bills. Like, I had to save money. I had no money, so I said no originally. And then when I saw him at Dairy Queen, he's like, please come, like, I'll buy. And I'm like, well, who am I to turn down a free meal, right? But I went there again, just like walking through fear, and like going to this group of guys who I probably would never hang out with, right? I go out to dinner now every Thursday for the past 7 months, and these people are like as good as family. I've met so many great people, and it's all because this guy gave me his number. And I love AA, and I love the fellowship. It's like the best part of it, right? Like, I'm not getting sober to be miserable and isolate. I'm getting sober so I can like learn how to live my life again and be like happy with myself and deal with my feelings, because again, as my sponsor says, like, I don't have that binky anymore. Like, I actually have to deal with things now today. And it's because of places like, the New England Recovery Center, Perennial Recovery, and AA is like the reason why I'm able to do those things today. So I just remember jumping like 2 feet in. I was like ready to go after that. And I got my 90 days. I started going on commitments. I got home groups. I have multiple positions in home group. I'm the greeter at a meeting on Monday night that has 200 men. and I shake every person's hand when they come in. And like, that's how I stay in the middle. Like, I might not share there as much as I need to, but like everyone knows my name or has at least heard me introduce myself for the 100th time to them. It's hard to remember people's names. But I'm a greeter at another meeting, and like, I know they say like I might be doing too much, but like, I just want to be involved. Like, I don't want to be the guy who sits in the back of speaker meetings and blends into the wall. I want people that if I'm not there, people check up on me if I'm not at a meeting. And like, that's something I didn't have. And I always had a loving, supporting family, but like, this is just, AA is just different. It's a different type of family. And I'm just truly blessed. Again, I go on a lot of commitments. I share a lot of my experience because, I'm a little bit of younger guy in AA, and I'm just lucky I got it now. And again, I'm just truly grateful to be here, and it was an honor for you guys to let me share my story on this platform. And thank you so much.
Greg, so much of what you said struck me. I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to get through
That's
all
great.
of it. But one of the things I just want to say, because before I forget to say it, is you just said you were just going to say yes to pretty much, whatever people bring to you. And that reminds me, Jesse, you probably remember because we just had Matt and Dylan on the podcast for our alumni. So you might know, you might have met Dylan Craig, but he said the same thing. He said, I didn't want to say yes to anything. He said, but I just told myself I was going to say yes to whatever somebody offered me because they clearly know better than I do. So I'm just going to keep saying yes and see what works. And that just really struck me, because really what you're doing by immersing yourself in all of this, right? Because I'm going to put my clinician hat on, is the drinking and the substances really create really strong pathways in your brain. And it takes a long time and a lot of retraining for your brain to develop new pathways. So if every single time you make a different choice, right, when under stress, like when you have that DoorDash example of like, I didn't just get tipped, like all of these things, or I'm gonna go to around the back to actually find the meeting instead of not. Like, you're actually retraining your brain for recovery versus for addiction. Right.
Absolutely.
It really, the way that you describe your recovery journey really strikes me in that way.
Well, thank you. I definitely appreciate that. And I did, I kind of clamped up at the end, but I do have to say, like, forgot to add is I've received so many blessings in such a short amount of time. So I finished up at the PHP, Perennial Recovery, and I've been plugging them quite a bit, but it's like they offered me a job to work here. And I'm actually recording live from the office. And, to see
You won't
someone.
tell your boss.
Yeah. Oh, no, they don't. They're looking forward to probably roasting me after this. But no, they're like, I work with such great people. And, to have an opportunity at like 4 or 5 months sober and like, hey, you were doing so well at this point that like we'd like to hire you on. It's like people that know my deepest, darkest secrets, and people know all the stuff I've done in my past and still want me, to be a part of the team. And like, I think helping people, it's like such a blessing. Like, I do things today and this is a crazy one that I could never possibly wrap my head around, but I do things today for people that without an expectation of anything in return. Like, I was such an eye for an eye person, like my entire life. Like, I'm only going to do this for you because like you're going to do something for me. It's like that expectation. And now like pushing down those expectations, like I don't have resentments if people don't, return the favor, or I don't expect anything, from anyone. I just do the next right thing because it's the next right thing to do. So I'm very grateful. And the last thing I'll say about working here is I was so excited to, get this job offer. And I remember telling someone who has 40 years of sobriety, like, hey, I blah, blah, blah. And then I know I'm getting this awesome opportunity. He looked at me and goes, Craig, that's a risky move, because he's like, you'll be around sick people. And, a lot of people think that's their recovery. And like, for me, I thought that was so asinine, but I took that almost as like an opportunity to even further my recovery. So like when I come here, like, yeah, it is great to talk to another alcoholic or addict, or it is awesome to be able to help someone, but like, it might as well be an Amazon warehouse. Like, I still have to go to meetings. Like, I go to meetings before work. I already hit one today. It was on step 12, which is about like giving back. And, Yeah, it's something I was truly blessed with. But it's because I took it serious and I put in the work at the same time too. So,
And you
You
even
know,
said yes to that gentleman, right? Who was like,
yeah.
this is risky. Like, you shouldn't. All right, well, I'm going to take that feedback, even though I don't agree with it. I'm going to take that feedback, right? And develop my own strong recovery outside of here. And honestly, like, that's not that he's not wrong, right? Like, so,
Nope.
like there will be times the longer you do this work, right? And I just was saying before this podcast, I just hit 25 years at Spectrum and Perennial Recovery Center, that are going to be really hard. And what you'll need the most at that point in time is your own recovery.
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. And I could relate so much to what you said. I could identify with a lot, Craig, from, you didn't say this exactly, but in your story of, you moved above the bar, right? Life was revolved around drinking and drugging. And, when you said, I thought drinking and driving was my problem, so I stopped driving. Yeah, I could relate to that. My world got very small in active addiction because all these other areas, people were calling me out for my BS. And you said that too, how beautifully said, you get the FOMO, fear of missing out, and you reach out and you're like, hey, what about me, guys? And they're like, yeah, we can't invite you because we're trying to plan this intervention for you.
Hmm.
Need help, right? And at the time, probably had a very different reaction to it than you do today, realizing
Oh,
like, oh,
absolutely.
these are like real good friends. And then, something else you said about being hired on at this place after they know all your deepest, darkest secrets. Yeah, that's my story too, bro. I came on this podcast 2 years ago to tell my story, and it started with getting paroled to Spectrum. And I said that, and then a little while later, they were like, "Hey, we need a co-host. Do you want to co-host?" Like, oh, here's another example of being honest and having opportunities, like you said, to say yes. And I do remember that podcast, Lisa. And I was thinking, if you aren't already hooked up with those guys with alumni, we'll get you hooked up, Craig. And I think you'll help them a lot, and I think they'll help you a lot because yeah, being connected to New England Recovery Center, being connected to Spectrum has certainly helped me a lot in my recovery. Um, a couple notes I just took down here, smoke weed alcoholically. Yep, I could relate to that. Definitely. It doesn't matter what it is, right? But that relief that you spoke about when you had an intake, I thought that was so poignant and just profound because I remember as a Spectrum employee standing there at that intake, and somebody would come in with their family member, and that's a really hard time for both. And I would stand there and I would talk to the person coming in and share a little bit about, like, you're in a safe place now, and this is what to expect. And then I would talk to the family member about the family services we have here, like our Fast Magnolia family support group we offer every week. If anyone listening to this now or later is interested, all you got to do is email magnolia@spectrumhealthsystems.org, and you will get the link to that. It's Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And not a lot of those people were experiencing relief, at least to me on the surface, right? They were experiencing anger, frustration, fear, but not so much relief. So I'm just wondering, like, what if you could think back now, like, why do you think you were experiencing relief in that very high stress situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was really like I had been living this double life for years and keeping up with stories and, borrowing money. And like I had moved back into my parents' house, and I can like remember like my car got repossessed. And it's like I didn't have any more bills, but yet like how am I not able to pay my bills? And I have less bills because I'm living at home. And just like all that lying, honestly, like that was one of the first things I tried to change, was just being honest, which is hard when like all you do is lie.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think just knowing I was in a safe place, knowing that I didn't have to keep up with those lies, and it was just, I think that's where the relief came. I feel like I don't have to live this double life anymore because, in the months coming to going into treatment, there were nights like I'm looking down at a bag crying, looking up NA meetings, looking up like, treatment centers. And it's crazy. Like I knew in my head the only way I was going to get sober was I was so far in, and the only way I could stop this is I'd probably go into a rehab. But again, I was so missing. I had no information on anything. This is my first time kind of going through everything. So it was, I think that relief of pretty much not living that double life anymore. And like anybody who's in my life, whether they're in my life today or not, or whether they wanted to stay, everyone kind of knew what was going on at that point. So I think that's where mainly that relief was coming from.
Awesome.
So, Craig, I share this at the beginning. Like, I love when we have guests on that last stop in active addiction was New England Recovery Center or Spectrum. And it was your first and last stop, right? We've had folks on the podcast which are just as valuable in their recovery, but 40 times, right? That's the more typical story that we hear. But your story is just as possible, and I think just as important to hear that although it certainly can be a longer road for many because of the chronic brain disease, right? You heard me talk about brain pathways earlier, that is addiction, but it also can be your first and last stop, right? Like that, that treatment episode, even being your first, could still be your last. And it just, that really, really strikes me. I think that you put a lot of the effort in, like, I think you deserve the credit for that for sure. But it really strikes me that it was, not just your last stop, which I love, but your first stop was Spectrum and New England Recovery Center. And here you are today.
Well, absolutely. I appreciate you saying that. We were talking about taking compliments earlier too, as well. So like, thank you for saying that. And yeah, I remember in one of the first groups, they were kind of like teaching people about like addiction, and the number was astronomical. It was like 1 in 33 people, I think. And it could have gone up from then and to now, but it's like 1 in 33 people stay sober. And I was like, that was daunting. That was like a daunting number to me. And I was like, well, I guess I could be the one. Why can't I? I just have to put in the effort. And unfortunately, I've people I was in treatment with have either already gone back or, kind of either dry drunk too. There's no way to live. Speaking of my, but yeah, I also, there was a story of that same Monday night group, TSDD, where the guy who founded the meeting came to speak, and he pointed at this guy, and said, that person's going to stay sober. And that person has stayed sober for the last like 13, 14 years. And he always tells that story. And that really meant a lot to him. And it kind of hit him like, you can be the one. Like, it's really your choice, or not. But just statistically speaking, like 1 out of 33, it's it's a daunting number. But if you put in it, it's honestly, it comes down to honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And I love hearing about that. I love talking about that, because like I was willing to do anything for a drink or a drug. And now I'm willing to do anything for my recovery. So like, that that was like a big switch to me when I heard that acronym HOW, is how we stay sober, is those 3 things. So
yeah, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not possible.
Exactly.
You're telling my story, bro. Thank you. I too went to Spectrum, and shameless plug for Spectrum, New England Recovery Center. It was my first stop, last stop. And I remember sitting in the commitment and hearing that 1 out of 33 and having that similar thought of, why not me? Why not? First off, those statistics are skewed in a way that, it's really hard to find hope in. But at that same TSDD meeting, I remember finding a tribe, finding camaraderie, right? We know the opposite of addiction is connection.
Absolutely.
And you are just a shining example of by saying yes and being willing, jumping in and being surrounded by other like-minded individuals going through similar situations. I too remain, I think I told you this when I met you at that Thursday night dinner. I remember going there when I was still a client at Spectrum. I don't know if I should have gone or not. Sorry, Lisa. But I did. And, yeah, on the surface, I'm like, I'm younger. I'm in my 20s. Here's all these people that are, closer to my parents' age. I don't really have much in common with them. And, here we are over a decade plus later, and I have more in common with them than I know. And
Oh
every
yeah.
time I go and this connection that, lasts through, miles and years and, not seeing them for a little while and then coming back and picking up right where you left off because you're honest, right? You just said how honest, open-minded, and willing.
Mhm.
It's one version of the truth. You stick to that. You don't have to worry about who you told what lie to, right? Open-minded, yeah. We all do this recovery thing a little bit different. We're allowed to have our own flavor or spin on it, but for the most part, there's more similar than different with us. And willing, just saying yes and saying, yeah, you could have told that guy, Dairy Queen, to go kick rocks. Could have said, no, I'm not going to that. Why are you stalking me? Get out of here.
Yeah, yeah.
But instead, you took that as this beautiful spiritual experience of maybe there's something bigger than Craig going on here.
Mm. Yeah, and that's a great transition, Jesse, because I did want to talk. So that man at Dairy Queen's now my sponsor. He's taken me through the steps, and I definitely want to talk about the steps real quick, just because like that's the work aspect of this whole thing, and like that's what's like helping me change, and doing a whole 4-step and a 5th step. When I tell you, my sponsor looked at me, and he goes, "I think we're done here. Do you feel you've done a complete job on this? Do you feel like you've done a thorough job?" And I took a second, I paused, which is a tool that I've learned coming to AA, is that ability not to just, fire, ready, aim, as I hear sometimes. Um, but I paused and I thought, and I got B's and C's in high school, but if I tried, I could have got A's. Like I didn't put in any effort in my athletic career. I didn't lift weights. I just relied on like natural talent, and I probably could have went somewhere and got a full ride to play football or a different sport if I tried. I call myself the cut corner king. Like I cut every single corner. I did everything half-assed just to get it done and be in this rush. Like, what am I in a rush for? Like, even on that's how I learned patience, by door dashing. Like, if someone's in front of me, like I'm not in this big rush like I think I am. So I looked at my sponsor and I told him that, and I said, yeah, I feel like I've done a thorough job for one time in my life. I put in a lot of work and a lot of effort, and I do that with my recovery. And when they talk about that feeling you get after just unloading everything you've done and all your fears and all, like, again, those deepest, darkest secrets I have, like unloading that on another person. um, I left that dinner on Thursday night. Everything, the world looked different to me. Lights were shining a bit different. I was a little more clear. I had, yeah, it's just like it's an unexplainable feeling. So I'm on step 6 now, and my whole thing was like, I'm willing to do these steps, but I'm also not like in a rush. Like I'm willing when they come, because there were people like when I was a client here that were like, I'm on my 4th step, and I'm like, well, why aren't I on my 4th step? And it's like, it's not about me, and I'm so glad I never asked my sponsor, like, hey, when am I going to do the 4th step? It was no, when we read the book once a week, when we get to the 3rd step, we're going to do the 3rd step prayer. And when we get to the 4th step, that's like, I'm not graduating from recovery. So I don't need to be in a rush to do it. So, but I know people who have like slow jammed on the 4th step. That can be an exit ramp, like to get off. And, I know people 4, 5, 6 years who, haven't done any of the steps. So it's not like that where I'm afraid to do it. I want to do it, but I'm just, when my sponsor says I'm ready to do things, like I need that in my life. Like I need to be told, well, I needed in the beginning to be kind of told, hey, this is how you're doing it. This is what we're doing. And I know there's suggestions, but I took those suggestions as almost commands, like, hey, try this meeting. Hey, you should get up at 7 a.m. and come to this meeting every day. I said, okay. And now I do go there every day. And it's like, I'm a part of another community that meets every day in the morning. And, people really put their stuff out there. And I also feel that if people are getting up at 5, 6 in the morning to come get a meeting of recovery and Alcoholics Anonymous, I go, those are people who really want it. So like I want to surround myself with the winners, as they say.
So one of the things that strikes me, some of the parallels to your story, you talked about your school experience, your athletic ability, like the things that you would kind of cut corners on, and and if they gave grades in recovery, you'd be getting an A, right? Because at this point, like, and this is what matters the most, right? A lot of people give their all to one thing and let other things fall apart. And recovery is everything, and it's not just one thing. So when you're giving all of your effort, right, your kind of straight A effort in to your recovery, you're giving a straight A effort into your whole life. Right.
Exactly.
And there's so many people, I say this all the time, is the real blessing about surrounding myself, doing this podcast, working in this field, but surrounding myself with individuals in recovery, is that they have to look at themselves fully and completely. And those that are not in recovery or have not had to strive for recovery don't ever have to even do that. And so may never give an A to their whole life, right? But there's an energy to individuals in recovery, and you give that energy from the second you popped on the screen, before we even started, right? You have that energy and that light about you that, honestly, I don't know, Jesse, what you think about that, but I think only people in recovery have.
Well, yes, I could really identify what you said, because I'm married to somebody who's not in recovery, and it's forced us to have these like really deeper conversations. Not that we hadn't before, but like, yeah, when your life's on the line, you become willing to do anything. And when I darkened the door of Spectrum Health Systems, I wasn't going there for a complete life overhaul. I was going there to get out of jail, right? The sheriff dropped me off, and I figured, ooh, there's girls here and there's better food. And that's where my small life was. And then I got so much more. And yeah, there is an energy in recovery because, Craig, myself, others that have come on the podcast over the years in recovery, we know we all have our rock bottom where we were before recovery. So not that we compare, because we're told to identify, not compare, but comparatively speaking, like, yeah, I haven't been in a jail cell in over 14 years. Right. I generally have all my basic necessities taken care of. I don't have to worry about the things, Craig, you were talking about, where, you're in this conflict where you're still doing these things, but you don't want to, and you're using against your own will. Yeah, I've been there, man. And knowing that, like, if I do X, Y, and Z, A, B, C are going to happen, and doing it anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, there is a energy, there is a power, right? Because of those things, like, that guy at Dairy Queen is now your sponsor, and he's the guy that's taking your hand and putting in the hand of your higher power. I get fired up listening to stuff. I remember when you first told me that, with that guy next to you. And
Yep.
like, this is how it works, guys. Right? There's something bigger than Jesse out there. There's something bigger than Craig out there. And when I just step back and like tune into that for a second, I can't argue with the results I get.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always a pleasure when you show up on Thursday nights. I get a lot from you. Even that first time we met, I don't know, I felt that energy that Lisa was just talking about. So I really appreciate that. You guys saying that. And yeah, it's like those God moments for me. Like, it's not the first one. It was the first one, but it's not the only one I've had. And it kind of just like almost like a reassurance, like, hey, we're on the right path. And yeah, that was really hard for me, was the whole concept. Because like, you immediately think like, I've turned my back on religion long ago. As someone said at a meeting last night, like, I'm a recovering Catholic, and which was funny, and I could identify as well. But it was like, it's a spirituality based program, and being spiritual and religious are two different things. And I think that's what's awesome about AA. It's like my conception of what I believe a higher power is, and I just have to believe in something greater than myself. And standing in line at Dairy Queen with that guy, that's when it hit me. So that was like the step two for me. Like, I came to realize that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And it's just like, again, I'm like so blessed. I've gotten so many gifts, but the thing, and like, at Perennial, my first clinician said, "You're going to get the car, you're going to get the house, you're going to get the girl, you're going to get all these material things." He's like, "Just keep coming, keep doing the right thing." But the greatest gifts that I've received are things money can't buy, like not living in that shame and guilt anymore that you hear a lot about. Like for the 30 days I stayed at, the Yellow Building and the Ferris Center. I remember the best part of my day was the 3 seconds I woke up and didn't realize that I thought of myself as a POS. That I hated myself so much. I'd be like dazed and confused, realize where I was, and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm a POS." And like it started getting a little better each day, and then all of a sudden one day it was like 11 a.m. I was like, "Hey, I haven't thought about what a D-bag I am." Like I haven't thought about what a scumbag I am. And when I came to this conception of a higher power, as I understand him, I thought, okay, if God loves me and God forgives me, who am I not to love and forgive myself for the things I've done? That would basically be me thinking I'm above God, and I'd have no humility, and then this thing I'm doing is not going to work. So yeah, I still get in pockets where like, I get a little down on myself, but I just don't stay there anymore. I don't stay there for months at a time. And I don't play the victim anymore and things like that. Or because no one can throw a pity party like Craig, let me tell you guys. So,
And, I think another good way for us to wrap up is one of the other things that you said that really struck me is that now you do things for others to get nothing in return. But the reality of it is that you do get something in return, right? Like you get that, build up of your self-esteem, you get that build up of your recovery, right? Like we give to build ourselves up as well. And so, you might not get something directly from that person you gave something to, but you're always getting something out of that.
yeah, it's like a cheat code almost. Like you do something for someone else and then you get that good feeling in return. But that's the point of at least my recovery is to help other people and bring them along so they can feel the same things that I feel. Even though it doesn't always work out because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I'm definitely willing to help anybody that I can.
I can't think of the exact term, but the Dalai Lama, speaking of multiple types of higher powers, it uses a phrase that's something like kind of selfish altruism or something like that, right? Like we do things that are good, but we actually selfishly get stuff out of it just by doing things that are good.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We build our self-esteem by doing esteemable acts.
Mm-hmm.
So when you help somebody, whether it's holding the door open for them or doing something like this and sharing your story to put it out there, you're building your self-esteem because it's an esteemable act.
Mm.
And I know I got a lot out of what you said today, and I'll take that with me throughout the day. So I want to thank you for coming on here and sharing your story with us and everyone, Craig.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's one of the biggest honors in my recovery so far. So thank you guys so much.
Well, stay connected to Spectrum New England Recovery Center, Craig.
Absolutely.
Oh, he will, Lisa, because right after this, I'm going to group text him with Matt and Dylan, and he already told us he has to say yes. So they're the guys that run the alumni program, and Perfect. I'll get connected with them.
Yeah, be happy to.
Awesome.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks so much, Craig. Thanks, Jesse. Thanks, James, for all of our production work. This is another episode of Airing Addiction. We'll see you back in April. If you liked this podcast, if you want to hear more amazing recovery stories and recovery content, subscribe, do all of those great things on our podcast, Airing Addiction. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.